Imagine stumbling upon a vast lost city in the Sahara Desert, where ancient engineers carved underground rivers from bone-dry sands to sustain a thriving empire for over 1,000 years. Today, we discover the Garamantes, a forgotten civilization that turned one of the world's harshest deserts into a bustling oasis of innovation and mystery. But how did they conquer the relentless heat and isolation? What secrets lie in their vanished settlements? And why did this powerhouse suddenly disappear? In this exploration, we'll uncover the Garamantes' origins amid shifting sands, their groundbreaking Foggara water systems that defied nature, their role as a pivotal trade hub connecting continents, their tense encounters with the Roman Empire, and the environmental riddles behind their decline. If these ancient enigmas captivate you, subscribe now for more hidden histories delivered straight to your feed. Stick around as we piece together this enigma from archaeological clues and ancient whispers. You won't believe what they've left behind. Let's start at the heart of it all, the Fezzan region in modern southwestern Libya, where the Garamantes built their domain around 500 BCE. Picture endless dunes stretching under a scorching sun, with no rivers or lakes in sight. Yet, here rose Garama, their capital, now known as Jarma or Jerma, a sprawling hub that once buzzed with life. Archaeological digs, like those from the Fezzan project in the late 1990s and the subsequent Desert Migrations project from 2007 to 2011, have mapped over 500 sites across a staggering 250,000 square miles, revealing a population that might have swelled to 50,000 or even 100,000 people at its height. These weren't simple nomads, as early Roman writers like Herodotus, Pliny the Elder, and Tacitus often painted them in biased accounts to justify imperial expansions. Instead, they formed a structured society, with mud brick fortresses, communal wells, and intricate burial grounds that included tumuli and necropolises. Emerging from Berber and Saharan pastoral routes around 1000 to 600 BCE, they adapted as the desert grew drier, turning from nomadic herding to settled farming in oases that dotted the landscape. Paleo-environmental studies from places like Wadi Tanazuft and Wadi al-Ajal show how the once lush Sahara, which had been a verdant savanna during the Holocene wet phase thousands of years earlier, dried up after ancient monsoons faded around 5,000 years ago, forcing these early inhabitants to innovate or perish. Core samples from lakebeds and pollen analysis indicate a gradual shift from grasslands to hyper-arid conditions, pushing communities to cluster around surviving water sources. And here's a teaser. We'll soon see how their early chariots raced across these routes, hinting at a mobile past that evolved into something far more permanent and sophisticated. By the early first millennium BCE, the Garamantes had claimed key oases like Wadi al-Ajal, also poetically called Wadi al-Hayat, meaning Valley of Life, which stretched for hundreds of kilometers and served as the lifeline for their settlements. Excavations at hill forts such as Zinchekra, perched on rocky escarpments for defense, uncover compounds with thick defensive walls made from local stone and mud, enclosing living quarters, storage silos, and even early workshops. These sites tell a story of transition, from scattered herders relying on goats and cattle to organized builders who constructed multi-room dwellings and communal spaces. The tumuli, those mound-like tombs scattered across the valley, date back to the 2nd and 1st centuries BCE, often containing multiple burials with grave goods like pottery shards and bone tools, suggesting rituals tied to ancestry and community bonds. Rock art scattered along their paths, etched into cave walls and boulders in areas like the Caucasus Mountains, depicts over 1,200 chariots pulled by horses before camels were domesticated and introduced around the 1st century CE. This artwork isn't just decoration. It shows how they zipped across the desert for trade, raids, and exploration, laying the groundwork for an empire that spanned vast territories. Scholars from the British Museum and University of Leicester have analyzed these petroglyphs, noting stylistic influences from Mediterranean cultures, which hint at early contacts long before Roman records. But what powered this growth and allowed them to thrive where others faltered? Hold that thought. We're diving into their water wizardry next, a system so advanced it might have inspired even the Romans and reshaped our understanding of ancient engineering. At the core of the Garamantes' success was their mastery over water, in a land where rain falls less than 10 millimeters a year, making survival a constant battle against desiccation. Enter the Foggara, an underground irrigation marvel. Sloping tunnels that tapped into ancient fossil aquifers hidden beneath the sands, remnants of prehistoric wet periods. Over 550 of these have been documented in Wadi al-Ajal alone, stretching a combined 750 kilometers, and built mostly between 100 BCE and 100 CE, with some evidence suggesting prototypes as early as 500 BCE. Each tunnel, some as long as 4 to 5 kilometers and dug by hand with simple tools like picks and baskets, featured vertical shafts spaced every 10 to 20 meters for ventilation, digging access, and maintenance, channeling water from sandstone reservoirs formed in wetter times thousands of years ago during the African humid period. Estimates from hydrological models suggest constructing these required a staggering 72,000 man-years of labor, with constant upkeep to prevent collapses from sand infiltration or seismic activity in the region. Thanks to this ingenious network, they grew a variety of crops including date palms for fruit and shade, barley and wheat for staple grains, grapes and figs for nutrition and trade, and even cotton, a crop likely introduced via early trade routes from the Nile Valley or beyond, fueling local textile production, with looms found in excavation sites. Archaeobotanical finds from Jarma, including carbonized seeds and plant remains preserved in dry conditions, confirm this diverse agriculture, turning barren land into fertile fields that supported not just subsistence, but surplus for commerce. And get this, their Foggara designs, with precise gradients of about 1 to 1,000 to ensure steady flow without erosion, may have influenced Roman engineering in North Africa, as similar canot systems appeared in frontier areas like Tripolitania after Roman contact. Studies from the Global Water Institute highlight how these tunnels extracted non-rechargeable groundwater at rates that sustained oasis farming for centuries. But we'll circle back to the consequences later. If this engineering marvel amazes you, hit that like button now to help uncover more ancient innovations like these. Summing up so far, the Garamantes didn't just survive the Sahara, they engineered a lost city in the Sahara Desert that bloomed against all odds, challenging our views of prehistoric adaptability. But how did they turn this into economic power? Let's explore their trade networks, where exotic goods flowed like hidden streams across continents. As a crossroads in the trans-Saharan trade, the Garamantes linked the Mediterranean world to sub-Saharan Africa, centuries before many realize, establishing routes that predated the more famous camel caravans of later eras. They exported salt harvested from evaporite deposits in desert pans, gold panned from southern wadis, ivory from elephants in the Sahel regions, ostrich feathers prized for Roman helmets and fans, and even captives as part of the era's harsh realities in slave-based economies. In return, they imported Roman glassware with intricate beadwork, pottery for daily use, bronze lamps and tools, and amphorae for storing olive oils and wines from North African ports. These routes stretched northward to Carthage and the coastal cities of Leptis Magna, westward to the Niger Bend where they connected with emerging West African polities, and southward to Lake Chad basins, with even hints of indirect connections to India through carnelian beads, semi-precious stones quarried in Gujarat and found polished in Garamantean workshops. Craft specialization thrived in their urban centers. Ironworking left behind slag heaps and forges at Jarma, indicating smelting techniques using local ores and charcoal fuel. Beadmakers shaped amazonite from the Foggara Mountains and carnelian from distant Tibesti, creating jewelry that has been unearthed in tombs across the region. Textiles were woven on warp-weighted looms, influenced by Punic styles from Phoenician traders, and woolen fabrics, traced back to their roots, have turned up in archaeological contexts like Kissi in modern Burkina Faso, dated to the early centuries CE. Bioarchaeological analysis of skeletal remains from cemeteries, such as those at Wadi Tanazuft, where 36 individuals were studied for cross-sectional geometry of long bones, paints a picture of hard labor, gracile builds adapted to endurance rather than brute strength, dental wear from gritty millet-based diets, and pathologies like osteoarthritis from repetitive tasks like tunnel digging. But a society without stark gender divides in burials, as both men and women were interred with similar goods. Adding intrigue, some skulls show artificial cranial deformation, a pseudo-circular shaping from binding practices in infancy, around 3,850 to 2,550 years before present, at sites like 96/129, suggesting social status markers, ritual significance, and possible migrations from Nile Valley influences. This deformation, documented in reports from the Italian-Libyan archaeological mission, corrects misconceptions of uniform cultural isolation, showing layers of interaction. If you're hooked on these trade secrets, drop a comment below with what ancient mystery you'd like us to explore next. This wasn't a ragtag group. It was a hierarchical trade empire with writing in a Berber script known as Tifinagh, etched on stones and ostraca, used for records and possibly religious inscriptions. We've covered their rise and tech. Now, imagine clashing with Rome's legions. What happened when empires collided in the sands? Interactions with Rome add layers of tension and exchange to the Garamantes story, transforming them from peripheral players to integral parts of the ancient world economy. Roman historians like Pliny the Elder, in his Natural History, and Tacitus in his Annals, describe them as fierce raiders on chariots, leading to punitive campaigns in 19 BCE by Lucius Cornelius Balbus, who marched deep into Fezzan with legions to secure trade paths and capture Oasis. Another expedition in 70 CE, under Septimius Valerius Festus, aimed to curb their influence and extract tribute, resulting in temporary Roman garrisons at sites like Chariot el Garbia. Yet, archaeology reveals more nuance beyond these biased texts. Roman artifacts like sigillata-ware pottery and glass vessels in Garamantian tombs, and Garamantian goods such as Saharan salt and feathers in Roman markets, point to alliances, treaties, and mutual economic dependencies. They supplied slaves captured in southern raids and exotic items like carbuncles, gems, while adopting some Roman tech like improved pottery wheels and olive presses that enhanced local production. Diplomatic ties kept the peace at times, with shared borders fostering mutual benefits, as evidenced by bilingual inscriptions and hybrid architecture in border forts. Lesser known, their charcoal-making technique, called Ised, involved burning dead acacia wood in low-oxygen pits dug into the sand, creating high-quality fuel for trade during droughts. A clever adaptation that highlights their resource smarts and sustainability in marginal environments, as detailed in environmental archaeology from the University of Cambridge. But as we'll see shortly, even these innovations couldn't hold back the sands forever. This interplay with Rome elevated the Garamantes from desert dwellers to key players, but it also sowed seeds of strain through increased demands on resources. By the 4th to 7th centuries CE, cracks appeared in this desert stronghold, signaling the beginning of the end for their lost city in the Sahara Desert. The main culprit? Aquifer exhaustion from prolonged extraction. Over a millennium, they pulled an estimated 30 billion gallons from non-renewable sources buried deep in the Ubari Sand Sea and Merzuk Basin. dropping water levels by tens of meters and rendering many foggaras obsolete as they could no longer reach the receding tables. Climatic data from ancient cypress trees, Cupressus dupresiana, in the region, analyzed through dendrochronology and oxygen isotope ratios, confirms late Holocene droughts that intensified around 300 CE, shrinking oases and demanding ever deeper digs, which required more slave labor they couldn't sustain amid shifting alliances. Overexploitation, possibly tied to expanding farms to meet Roman trade demands and population growth, accelerated the fall, with soil salinization from evaporated irrigation water further degrading farmlands. Settlements like Garama were gradually abandoned, leaving ruins swallowed by advancing dunes, as seen in stratigraphic layers from excavations showing layers of wind-blown sand over domestic debris. Some cultural threads lingered into early Islamic eras, with Arab chroniclers like al-Idrisi mentioning remnants, and Christianity flickered briefly after a Byzantine reconquest in 533 CE, evidenced by cross motifs on pottery shards. But the core society vanished, dispersing into smaller nomadic groups. Recent satellite scans using remote sensing post-2011, after political changes in Libya, have unveiled hundreds more villages, khazars, fortified granaries, and foggaras hidden under sand, underscoring their urban scale, while genetic studies of modern Tuareg descendants debunk old myths of racial isolation, showing diverse ancestries from Mediterranean, sub-Saharan, and Berber lineages. To recap this segment, environmental tipping points, compounded by human pressures rather than just invasions, doomed this lost city in the Sahara Desert, leaving puzzles for modern scholars to solve through ongoing digs. Wrapping up our journey through the Garamantes world, we've seen how they rose from arid origins amid environmental shifts, engineered foggaras to harness hidden waters with remarkable precision, built a trade empire bridging worlds through exotic exchanges, navigated Roman rivalries with a mix of conflict and cooperation, and ultimately faded as the desert reclaimed its own due to unsustainable practices. These revelations correct old views of them as mere barbarians, revealing a sophisticated society that pioneered urban life in extreme conditions and influenced broader African history. If this peek into ancient mysteries hooked you, hit that like button, subscribe for more hidden histories, and share your thoughts in the comments. What lost civilization should we uncover next? Thank you for watching. This is Ancient Chronicles HD. See you in the next mystery.